So in the last model, we learned how to use triggers and actions to build automations inside n8n. Now we are taking this a step further. We are connecting outside applications, and to do this, we need a few things to be in place first. Connecting external applications to n8n is where the real magic happens, because APIs is how other tools talk to n8n. So whether you want to pull data from a CRM, or you're checking the weather, or you're sending an email, it all happens through APIs. Let's start first with authentication, because authentication is basically how n8n proves who it is when it's talking to an external system. So I'm going to come back into my n8n now, and inside n8n, you see that we have the workflow tab and we have the credential tab. I'm really interested in the credential tab right now. You see that I already have some credentials I'm already connected to, but I want to talk about 3 main types of credentials I typically see a lot when trying to connect to external tools. So I'm going to click on create credentials, and in here you can see I have Auth2 APIs. You can see I have things, sometimes they're asking for just API keys, they're asking for things like access tokens. I'm going to explain what all these things mean. I want to start first with a basic authentication. So I'm going to select basic authentication here, and I'm going to click on continue. You can see that for basic auth, they're basically just asking for username and password. This is really the simplest form of authentication out there that you can get, and usually they'll just ask you for username and password. I'll say that while this is simple, it's only recommended to use like basic auth when you're building internal company systems, or like you're dealing with legacy systems, because there are a lot of modern ways of doing this in such a way that your system is safe and secure. But yeah, basic auth is one of the ways in which you'll be able to like connect to external systems. So anytime you're connecting to an external application and they're just asking for a username and a password, just know that they're just using like basic authentication. Now, the other type of authentication, which I'll say is probably the most common and maybe easiest to implement, is APIs. Okay, so if I take an application like Gemini, okay, you can see that it's asking for a host and an API key. So like I mentioned earlier on, API keys are the most common. All you need is just like a single key provided by a service, and you'll be able to like authenticate to that service and communicate and have any conversations with that application. So it's just like you would have like a password for an app. You see this with a lot of other applications like Open Weather, News API, even Stripe, I think, uses API keys. And all you need to do is usually you can either just paste the API key in there, or sometimes they may say that have it in a specific format. So in that case, if you are putting in parameters, you just say like authorization, and then you'd have like bearer, and then you have your API key. It really depends on how the application is set up to receive these type of keys. For Google Gemini, for instance, we're just putting in the host URL here, and then you're just putting in the API key. But in other applications, you would have to put them in like parameters where you would say, okay, authorization, and then inside the value you'd have like bearer, and then you'd have like the API key in there. So this is another way to authenticate with other systems that are outside n8n. Now, the other way I want to also touch on is Auth2. So Auth2 is usually used for like big platforms, and I know that Google owns Gemini, but they have API key for Gemini. And when it comes to Gmail accounts, like if you're trying to authenticate with Gmail accounts, you have to like use the client ID and the client secrets. This is typically used for like big platforms. So think any of Google's applications like Google Drive, Gmail, Slack, Notion. Most of these platforms would use Auth2 for authentication because it's a more secure token exchange, and you log in once and the platform would give n8n a token that says yes, this user is authorized. So you can see I have my client ID, I have my client secrets in here. So if I just click on like sign in with Google, I can immediately authenticate this, and then just by doing that, like I'll be able to have access to n8n, and I'll be able to use it for a duration of time. So this is definitely like a really good way to keep your application secure, and it's a secure way to basically communicate with other external systems. The good thing is that you rarely type credentials all the time manually. n8n handles the whole OAuth handshake and everything for you. So yeah, let me just wrap up here. So in short, all I just want to say is like APIs, they're just a way for you to connect with other systems, and there are different forms of authentication methods that you can use. So if you're building an application, just make sure that you're always going to check the API documentation. And when you go into the API documentation, always make sure that you're looking for the authentication or authorization section so that you know which of these methods to use. If you're not using APIs, then the application will not know whether it should give you access or not. APIs need to know who is asking, and authentication is how they verify you. So you cannot build an application communicating with an external system without using APIs.